Okay, Senator Abraham suggests lack of a quorum, so let's call the roll, Madam Secretary.
Senator Morris.
Here.
President Senator Abraham.
Here.
President Senator Barrow. Here. President Senator Cloud. Senator Hodges. Here. President Senator Kleinpeter. Here. President Senator Miguez. Here. President, we have 5 members present. 5 members in a quorum. Okay, we're going to start off right now with House Bill number 5 by Representative Muscarello. Representative, on your bill.
Thank you, Chairman Morris and members. HB 6 does 3 things. It declares that any and all records or information pertaining to the purchase, providing, and manufacturing of any drugs related to the death penalty shall be strictly confidential and not subject to public disclosure. 2, it would make disclosure by a person subject to civil or criminal penalties. And 3, it adds the methods of execution to be lethal injection, nitrogen hypoxia, and electrocution.
Wait, let's back up a minute. Did I say House Bill 5? I meant to say House Bill 6. We're going to do House Bill 6. That was my mistake. If I said 5. We're on House Bill 6, so if you would, Representative, please start over.
Members, this bill does 3 things. It declares that any records or information pertaining to the purchase or manufacturing of any drugs related to the death penalty shall be strictly confidential and not subject to public disclosure. 2, it would make disclosure a civil or criminal penalty. And 3, it should add the execution method shall be lethal injection, nitrogen hypoxia, and electrocution. This bill will bring healthy debate, as it should. What's not debatable is that the death penalty is legal in Louisiana, and that 57 people currently sit on death row waiting to be sentenced to death. Behind every victim are families who consistently sit through numerous legal proceedings, each hearing resurfacing the horrific stories of their loss. Yet after the appeal delays are done and the time to honor the commitment is come, nothing happens. It's time for us to uphold our oath, and go forward with the laws of our state so that justice can be served. And I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative. The board is clear right now, so I am going to start with the supporters of the bill, and am going to identify those who wish to speak. We have quite a number, so let's y'all come up 3 at a time. Howard Vincent, John Sinkfield.
Not here yet.
He's not here. Okay. Wayne Gazzaro or Gazzardo.
It's me, yes, sir.
And Susan Michelle Jubin Perkins. So let's start with you 3, and we'll take it from there.
Nobody's toes.
Okay, we'll go from left to right, if that's okay. Ms. Perkins, please state your name and give us your testimony.
Susan Michelle Jubin Perkins. I'm from Denham Springs. It's my hometown. I live in Caddo Parish now, but I lived in San Diego some years back when Stephanie was murdered. I had returned home from working in the brokerage firm downtown San Diego, and it come across the news, breaking news from Baton Rouge. And when you hear breaking news in Baton Rouge on San Diego News, it got my alert because I'm from Denham Springs. Stephanie's voice comes across my TV, and she's pleading for her life. And I called home, and I said, is that Stephanie from Denham? And my mom says, yeah. I had come home earlier. I don't remember if I was in the Marine Corps. I'd gotten out. I'd come home, and my mom and stepdad had taken me to eat at the very restaurant that Stephanie lost her life in. I started a grassroots organization. It's just for victims because I saw Mr. and Mrs. Gazzardo on the TV after I left San Diego. I got to Caddo Parish, and I was following the case on the news, but I hadn't talked to the Gazzardos because I was in San Diego. Stephanie was a classmate of mine. And so, when classmate, you go your separate ways through life. Well, I see Mr. and Mrs. Gazzardo on the TV, and Governor John Bell had put a moratorium on. And I see Mr. and Mrs. Gazzardo on the TV, and they're crying because the appeals had all been exhausted. We were waiting on a court date. And so I called him and I said, what can I do? Educate me, what's going on? And so Mr. Gazzardo explained to me what was going on. And the more I got upset, the more I started calling around. I started talking to district attorneys, got involved, contacted crime fighters, and started. And I can tell you, it's a whole different situation. I know it's very emotional on the debate of the death penalty, but I'm also married to a police officer that's done 32 years down at Shreveport. And I'm real angry that this is happening in Louisiana. And I'm tired of our legislators and the people saying how much they do for the criminals. The problem is, in this state, they have forgotten about the victims. Our cities are wrapped in crime scene tape, rounds coming down range. I served in the Marine Corps, so I get real upset when y'all start bringing racial issues because we've just celebrated Mardi Gras. All over this state, it's like a gumbo pot. We all love each other's culture. But when you start talking about the death penalty, it splits, and it's got to stop. Because you know what? The killer chose the victim didn't choose the killer. And I've watched Mr. and Mrs. Gazzardo. Last time we were in the Senate across the hall, they come in and tabled the bill. You know what the senator did? She told the guard to get Mr. Gazzardo out of there because he was trying to ask a question. That's how they treated the victims. That's how they treat their families. And it's not until we've got a governor that's going to sign the bill and we got legislators that are actually hearing the cries from the victims. What's sad is this journey of the last 8 years. You know how many hundreds of people have died in Louisiana? I mean, our cities are wrapped in crime scene tape. The Mardi Gras parades, everybody parties together, everybody has a good time. Victim after victim. Connie LaPlace, killed her husband. She shot in the head. She pleaded, fought to get justice. She's dead. She can't even testify. One of the killers is already out. The Code case in Shreveport, he killed 5 people of one family. That gentleman that was in that family served in the Air Force, got out, and has retired. And you know what really makes me really mad? That the news media talks about death row. They need air conditioner down there. They're serving court documents because they're not getting Dr. Peppers. Really? This is what our state is fighting for, and I'm mad about it. And I'm sick of seeing how these legislators and the news media post these victims. They forget about the victims and they want to roll out the red carpet for these criminals. They're hardened criminals. I don't want to hear about the pity party for the criminals because when they start talking about they're innocent, really? They got tattoos bragging about their kill. Stephanie's killer shot 4 and killed 2. But they forget about David Breckenwell. Thank God Mr. Gazzardo held the case because you know what? He's one of the ones that's been holding the death penalty case because all the other victims' families, they've been threatened. They've been harassed by our own legislators and by our own news media. It's got to stop. People are dying all over our state.
Thank you for your testimony. I appreciate your impassioned plea for your friend. We do have a 4-minute rule. A lot of people weren't aware weren't here when we started, but we want everybody to have an opportunity to speak. So next we'll have Mr. Gazzardo.
Thank y'all for having us. I've been doing this a long time, for 28 years and 3 months. My daughter Stephanie worked at Calendar. She was the manager. And Todd Wessinger, I want to get one thing straight with the news media. He wasn't a disgruntled employee. He had been arrested because he was on probation. He had been arrested for cocaine and a handgun, and he was in jail. He just never showed back up for work. So I want the media to know that he was not a disgruntled employee. But anyway, he knew the routine because he had worked there. And he rode up there on a bicycle and waited for the bartender to drive in. Bartender opened the door, went to clock in. He shot him in the back twice, left him to die. When my daughter heard the shot, she knew something was wrong. She was in a 6-by-8-foot office. She picked up the phone and called 911 to get help for her employees. Well, he went into office, and she had $7,000. And when she was on 911, he told her, give me the money. She gave him the money and was begging for her life. Please don't kill me. He told her, shut up, bitch. And he shot her in the heart and left her there. They had a cook, Mr. Breakwell, was in the cooler. When he heard the second shot, he got scared, and he went to run. Long story short, his messenger ran into him, shot him in the back twice and killed him. None of these people there were armed. None of these people there were threats. He was just a cold-blooded murderer. In 1997, we went to trial, and they found him guilty of murder in the first degree, and the jury gave him the death sentence. We've been to 25, north of 25. We've been to north of 25 appeals. We've been to every one of them, and they have come up with some things you can't even imagine. We've gone as far as the Louisiana Supreme Court, the Supreme Court in New Orleans, and it's gone all the way to the Washington Supreme Court, where they voted. They weighed everything, looked at all the appeals, did the whole 9 yards. They voted 8-1 to uphold his execution. You're going to have people here, the majority of the people that are against the death penalty, they're going to give you statistics and opinions. These victims' families are going to give you reality. They're going to give you reality. They talk about letting 22 of them were found not guilty on death row. Well, they forget to tell you how many of those 22 were let on technicalities. They weren't innocent. They just were let out on technicalities. They don't tell you that in their statistics. But the victims here know we're here for reality. I said it last week, while he's there, we had no idea he had all those rights. While he's there visiting with his mother and father and laughing and, not dad, his dad is dead, but laughing and joking with Kim, me and my wife are at the graveyard bringing flowers, wishing we could talk to her, wishing she could talk back. She doesn't, and it'll never happen. As far as remorse, they want to come up here, oh, they so sorry, he's so good, and now he's doing this. Well, let me tell you what he did. He walked into court the first day and beating on the Bible. I'm a soldier for the Lord. The next time we go to court, he's got 2 tattooed teardrops on his eye with his held head high so everybody could see how many key people he murdered. He doesn't have any remorse. I had a lady at the parole board meeting said that he'd love to talk to me. Well, hell will freeze over before we talk to him. Our lives, we were not, are not, and never be the same again, ever. We think of Stephanie every day. Our lives have changed, and it's never going to be the same. We will never recover from this, ever. And it's been 28 years. Her absence at birthdays, at Christmas, at Thanksgiving. We're a family, but we're not a whole family. And her chair is empty, and we miss her dearly. A lot of them want to accuse us of going for revenge. This is not revenge. We don't want any revenge. That's no good. We want justice. And the state of Louisiana has a law for execution. If not, why do we even have judges? Why do we have juries? You know, why do we have appellate courts? These people talk about stuff they have no idea what the real deal is. You're going to hear some horror stories here today. But anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Gardo. I'm afraid you're out of time, and I've gone over a little bit, but I appreciate your testimony. Your daughter is very beautiful. See her picture. Mr. Vincent, please give us your testimony. State your name.
Howard Vincent. I'm here to tell you my story of my little brother who served as an Army vet, survived combat, worked almost 20 years as a cop. He was a Louisiana State Trooper. He was kind. He was trying to help this evil, deviant person. The people that are here aren't here for people. I would never want to see an innocent man put to death. We're talking about people that have absolutely no remorse, never apologized for what they did. All they worried about is themselves. And my little brother was dispatched to a car wreck. He went to render aid to someone that might have been hurt. this guy and told the guy, I'm not here to arrest you. I am here, I'm going to help you, and I'm going to give you a ride home. What he didn't know was that this sorry, evil, deviant person killed his roommate, stole the truck, and was on a mission to likely harm someone else. Brandished a sawed-off shotgun and tried to blow my brother's face off. So it's really hard for victims to have to listen to, oh, they gasped for air under anesthesia because they were given a drug. When my little brother was laying on hot asphalt with his face half blown out, brain matter coming out of his head, and this guy's standing over his body. This is on video, by the way. There's no question about whether this guy did it or not. He did it, and tells him, this is your day to die. I hope you die. Making threats, threatening every officer out there. If he had opportunity, he'd kill them. This is not a person that we want in our society, and we deserve the justice. This guy had a criminal history. He's been in and out of jail the majority of his life. Had he been sentenced to some of this new sentencing I'm hearing about, my little brother would be alive today. He's been running the streets all his life, getting out of jail, and escalated to the point where he was even more of a danger to society. I am talking about people that are extremely dangerous. I'm not talking about a circumstantial evidence case where there's a mistaken identity or eyewitness. I understand that stuff. I'm talking about DNA on video committing the crime, witnesses, and a confession, which far exceeds our court standard of beyond a reasonable doubt. There's no question. I'm talking about a man who laughed at my sister testifying in court and thinks it's funny to kill people. I have been a cop for almost 30 years, and I've watched a lot of fellow officers put their life on the line. And I will say the last statistic I heard, less than 1% of peace officers are bad. Measure that up with any other career. Nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop. My little brother was a good cop. He wasn't even fighting with this guy. He was trying to help him. So it's really hard for victims to sit here and listen to us. I forgive him. I'm a Christian, but he deserves his penalty. We've had to sit through 2 conviction sentencing. 2 jurors decided he needed to be put to death, and we're still going. And this man here encouraged me to come up here because I was saying, man, it's been almost 10 years we've been dealing with this. My poor mama, it makes me want to cry. She don't have her son. And he encouraged me. 30 years almost. That's ridiculous. The law of this land is, in this state, we have a death sentence, and we need to make sure we have whatever's needed in accordance to the law to put them to death.
Thank you for your testimony. It was very compelling. Senator Kleinpeter for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Semper Fi, former Marine as well. Mr. Gardo and Mr. Perkins, or Mr. Vincent, I'm sorry. Thank y'all for coming up here and testifying about your lost loved ones. Their day will come soon.
Amen.
Trust the process.
We appreciate y'all listening
Yes,
to
very
us.
much. Thank y'all for listening.
Thank you, Senator Kleinpeter. Senator Abraham for a question.
Yes, no, I just want to thank all of y'all, and then a little personal privilege. Mr. Vince is a constituent of mine. I appreciate you coming up here, and thank you for testifying.
I appreciate all you do
And
and
thank you for
support.
your service. Law enforcement, thank you every day.
We appreciate your service, too. You do a great job.
Thank you. And, of course, I also would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge our district attorney, Mr. Stephen Dwight, sitting in the back there. Stephen, thank you for coming. Give support for these people. Thank you.
These people are the real victims. I'll say that. Thank you, Senator Abraham.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I missed a card call. I'm John Sinkfield, and at the appropriate time, I would like to.
Certainly, come on up, Mr. Singfield. I've got you. I hadn't thrown your card away, so you're in good shape.
I'm sorry.
We got John Singfield. Let's also bring Sandy Riches, and Dana Lee Burton. Mr. Singfield, you can start, since you're already settled, and we'll work our way this way. Just state your name and give us your testimony, please, sir.
Yes, John Sinkfield, Executive Counsel to Attorney General Liz Murrell. I've been first assistant to 3 district attorneys and 2 attorney generals in the state of Louisiana. Now I'm Executive Counsel. I prosecuted death penalty cases for, I guess, approximately 50 years in the state of Louisiana, New Orleans, Lake Charles, Baton Rouge. I was in the DA's office here for a total of 28 years. I've had probably, depending on counts, 9 to 11 death penalty verdicts returned. I've had 3 people actually executed that I prosecuted, 2 electrocuted, and 1 lethal injection, and I attended the lethal injection. I'm here to ask you, please pass this bill. Give us alternative methods of execution. I prosecuted in 1997 the person that killed Wayne Gazzardo's daughter, and I can't tell you the number of hearings that I went through. Federal court, state Supreme Court, only to get right on where we thought he was qualified for execution to be told for 8 years that we couldn't get the drugs for lethal injection. So we need an alternative means of execution. Across the hall, probably 20, 25, maybe 30 years ago, I was over there when the anti-death penalty opponent showed up against the electric chair and testified that lethal injection was a painful, humane way to execute. So we adopted it. Then they turned around and started filing saying that lethal injection, actually the person was in pain and it was inhumane and unconstitutional and everything else. It doesn't matter what method you select, they're going to argue that it's cruel and unusual punishment and painful and the person shouldn't go through it. They're going to argue about botched executions. There's a way that you can avoid being a person in a botched execution. Don't rape and murder people. Don't kill children. Don't go in schools and shoot up our students. Don't throw bombs and blow people's legs off like up they did in Boston, and you won't have to worry about a botched execution. But even a botched one is usually better than what they did to their victims. So they at least have the consolation of knowing that what's happening to them is not as bad as what they did. Now, having said that, you can go on. The electric chair was invented by an employee of Thomas Edison, sold to the state of New York as a more humane way of executing people than hanging. There have been approximately 4,374 executions by electric chair in the United States since it was invented around 1881, most of which have went down, as far as I know, without problems, although you're going to have a bunch of people up here saying no and there's suits against it. When you go to nitrogen hypoxia, that's where you breathe in nitrogen, except it's colorless, odorless. You don't know you're breathing it. The way they discovered that it was probably a painless method of people dying was that it happens to divers. I don't know if there's any divers up here, but apparently they mix nitrogen and oxygen, they get the mix wrong, and sometimes they die from it, which of course is unfortunate. It had, of course, one out in Alabama that was done recently, and of course the opponents of the death penalty are saying, oh, he suffered, he gagged, did this, that, and the other. But he accepted with another man $1,000 to murder a woman, allegedly. That's what he was convicted of a pastor's wife. So it's what he went through. Justification for taking $1,000 to basically kill somebody. I attended the lethal injection I went to, which appeared to be a very peaceful way to die. It appeared that the person simply went to sleep. So I would simply say, please, please consider these alternate methods of execution. We need them because it's too easy to block the drugs or say we can't get the drugs to carry out lethal injection. And we don't want to torture people like they did. We simply want to, under due process, execute them. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Burton, want to go next?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Good afternoon, and I want to thank you all for your service to our communities. My name is Dana Lee Burton. When my son, Etienne, was 11 months old, he would take his first steps. On this morning, we were to have our first family portrait with his father and his 2.5-year-old sister. We were carjacked in front of our home. I was held at gunpoint, trapped in my car. The door was broken, and the gunman blocked the only way out of my car. I begged and I pleaded, please let me take my children out. And he took the gun and he pointed it at both of their heads, at 2 little children in their car seats. I'm sorry. I would be stripped naked on Magazine Street when the EMS arrived, in front of onlookers watching me, as I had been shot 4 times, and my son had been shot in the head during the carjacking. When I arrived at Charity Hospital, I was shaking and quivering to the point I almost fell off of the table and passing out. No pain relief was given to me for 6 hours. I was given Tylenol 3 at the end of the day. I was in a urine-soaked bed because the catheters were defective. I was in a room with 15 strangers who were, some of them handcuffed to the beds. No phone, no information about my son, if he was alive or dead. Nobody would tell me. That's pain. And then when I was taken to Children's Hospital the following day, I was told my son would be a vegetable if he survived, and that would I like to take him off life support. That was a very, very hard decision to make. The hardest decision of my life. So I beg you, when you make your decision today, know I understand it's not an easy one. I have so much compassion in my heart for our community and for the people in our community. He would die in my arms 2 days after the carjacking. And he wanted to live, and I could barely hold on to him. He was falling out of my arms because I only had one arm to hold him with, because I had been shot in my arm twice, which I still have bullets in my arm today, and my leg and my foot. I was unable to go to the bathroom and walk for a very long time. So that's pain. It was very hard explaining to my, can I finish? It was very hard explaining to my 2.5-year-old daughter that her brother had died. 2 days before the carjacking, the carjacker shot Gary Booker, who was 20 years old, 8 times in the back. Why are the rights of murderers more important than the victims? Why do they get a second chance? What are we telling society when taking anger management, getting your GED, and time served makes up for killing someone because life in prison doesn't mean life in prison anymore? Not a day goes by that I don't miss my son and long for him. His voice has been forever silenced. Hear him now. Give him justice. Let society know that murder has a severe consequence, death. Just imagine if all the resources used for murderers could be used to build schools, affordable housing, youth programs, resources for those who value life, for those, not for those who have murdered children and innocent victims.
I'm all for programs which enrich and provide tools for people to become successful in life. My daughter got her master's in clinical child therapy at Loyola University. She worked for the DA's office with the youth diversion program for several years and continues to serve her community. My son will never have that opportunity. This is not about vengeance. This is about justice. I support this bill. I believe this will provide much-needed relief to the victims and justice to those who have been forever silenced.
Thank you for your
Wait, one
testimony.
more-
Senator Hodges just wants to ask a question. You don't have to leave.
Okay.
I want to just say thank you. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for having the courage to do that, because I know it's, excuse me, it's very, very painful, and I'm so sorry for your nightmare. Where are you from,
I'm from New Orleans, 3 generations.
and where do you live now?
I live in Florida now.
Okay, so I just want the committee to know how passionate you are about this, the fact that you took off and you came here at your own expense, came from Florida. You came to Louisiana last year. Can you tell me why you came last year?
For a clemency hearing, and by the way, Clifford DeRoos, the murderer, he's still committing crimes while he's in prison. The most recent was aggravated rape. He shouldn't have even been up for clemency. And it's been 28 years in waiting, and there have been over 20 appeals, and I will say most of them I had not been notified about. And I've read through the appeals, and they were really riddled with lies and things that weren't true. The case is so shut, so many witnesses, forensics. I mean, I didn't want to bog this down with that, and this, I'm trying to keep it as tight as possible and let you know, like, we often don't hear from victims because it is so terribly painful. I feel like I'm reliving the worst day of my life when I share it in front of strangers. It's very hard, but I do it for my son. He wanted to live. He really did. Like everybody here in this room wants to live. If you
Right.
take someone's life, you just don't deserve to be here anymore. Let him make peace with God. Let the murderer make peace with God.
Well, thank you for having the courage to endure the pain. You've endured the worst pain of any human being that they can endure, and that's the loss of a child. And in the way that it happened is unthinkable. So thank you. I believe your voice is being heard, and it's making a difference. So thank you, Dana, for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you, Senator Hodges. Ms. Riches.
Well, I'm speaking from the heart of a mother and a grandmother. I will never forget the
Please state your name for the record.
Sandy Riches. Sorry.
Thank you, ma'am.
I will never forget the frantic phone call that I received from my son-in-law telling me my daughter and grandson had been shot. I would find out that my daughter was shot 4 times. My 2.5-year-old granddaughter suffered from injuries from flying glass, and at the end, my 11-month-old grandson was shot in the head. Well, that day changed my lives, my family's lives forever, and the loss never goes away. The empty chair at each holiday gathering, birthday celebrations, and just everyday life that Etienne did not have a chance to live or be a part of. I can only imagine that the young man that he would have been. I think of the impact that he would have had on our lives and the world. The carjacker was convicted and was given the death penalty. But we've been waiting 28 years for justice to be served and for him to receive his sentence. The endless appeals cause so much pain and brings back all of the memories to the victims and their families. It's just devastating and gut-wrenching to relive the worst day of your lives. During the murder trial, my grandson's murderer laughed at the family members when they were crying after seeing the autopsy photos of Etienne. There was no remorse, no respect. So I believe in this bill, and pray that it will be passed and that it can help bring closure to so many lives. I have never hurt so much when I had to listen and be a part of all that Dana had to go through with this clemency hearing. It was terrible. It was weeks and weeks and weeks of research and doing so many things to try to get all the information that she needed. And it just never stops. You never forget it. So thank you. Thank you for
Thank you for your
listening.
testimony. Okay, are you Michael Riches?
Yes, yeah,
Okay,
yes, sir.
please state your name and go ahead with your testimony. Thank you, sir.
Right. My name is Michael Riches. Good afternoon. Dana's my sister, and this is my mom. I'm also here to offer a victim's perspective from 3 different places in time, the past, the present, and the future. So in the past, before this horrible incident that changed my family's life forever, I was a senior in high school. The worst crime that I would experience was a stolen bike. I knew the person who stole the bike, but because it was hearsay, nothing could be done to the person who stole my bike. At one point in time, I was in the newspaper. There was a picture of me learning to ride a skateboard with my neighbor on the front of the metro section. And the only time that I visited the state capitol was on a field trip. And I still remember going through the front part and them pointing out the bullet holes in the lobby from Governor Huey Long's assassination. So that was the past. Today I'm back at the state capitol. But the bullets I speak of are not part of a tour. I've been in the newspaper again, and I've had additional experience with our judicial system. 4 of those bullets went into my sister, and the one that went into my 11-month-old nephew Etienne, that took his life. He was a nephew I barely knew. I only held him a few times. Our time together was very brief. And my family's been on the front page of the newspaper a few times, and I would be on the front page as well. This time, me and my father were carrying his tiny blue casket out of the funeral home. Unlike the stolen bike, there were witnesses, judges, jurors, a court, and a judicial system that made a unanimous decision. And today, I feel like that decision was partially, it was a lie. And I believe it's extremely disrespectful to all those involved with that process to try and change what's already been decided. And so I hope you seriously consider House Bill 6 because it will allow our state to honor a decision and a promise that it made to my family. I admire my sister's tremendous strength every time she has to speak, and I'll always be by her side. This is extremely difficult for us and the many more families you can't see. So what does the future hold? I hope our future trips to this Capitol are under very different circumstances, and I hope the future holds a judicial system that can honor the decisions and promises it made to victims. Enough is enough. You have the power to help not only my strong and vocal and visible family, but the many more strong, silent, and invisible families that are not here today. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Senator, well, no, he waves. So I didn't realize all these witnesses were related to one another, but we still have, you were Michael Riches, right? And now we have Adam Lancaster.
I'm not speaking. No, he's not
No, he waves. And Carol Gazzardo. She waves. And no other witnesses wanted to speak in support of the bill, correct? Okay, we have one green card in support, not wishing to speak. Mike Renatza Executive Director of Louisiana Sheriff's Association. So I've got to say that this is the most compelling thing I've ever heard. Thank you. All right, Senator Abraham.
I do want to thank y'all for coming. It is a little emotional, but it's not to try to make it better, but as a Christian, I do believe that God will restore everything you've lost at some point, whether it be eternity. So rest in that, and thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. I have a really amazing relationship with God. I wouldn't be sitting here today. You know, there are people that have met me and didn't know I went through what I went through because I lived for God since I was a little girl and served my community, and thank you for that. I appreciate it.
I admire you very much. Okay, if y'all would clear the table, we're going to bring the opposition up. I'm going to bring them up 3 at a time. We have quite a number. So let's start with Brett Malone, Gary Clemens, Clemens, and Michael Cahoon. If you would, on my right, if you would state your name and begin your testimony, please, sir.
Hello, committee. My name is Michael Cahoon with the Promise of Justice Initiative. Thank you all. And I just wanted to start by acknowledging how incredibly difficult and hard this conversation is. And when we discuss this bill, wanting to start from a place that the system that we have that is legal, the death penalty is the law of the land, as was pointed out in the beginning, is so broken. And, you know, I think that it changes, and I'm not an attorney, I can't speak to all the appeals and things like that, but one of the things we've seen over and over again, and when we've brought bills to try to repeal the death penalty prospectively, which this bill, obviously that has nothing to do with this, but is that because the law changes so much and because the conditions of who is eligible for a death sentence changes so much, it leads to many, many sort of promises, commitments, and expectations that the state, for a variety of reasons, is unable to keep over the decades. That's why U.S. Supreme Court Justice Harry Blackmun, who was a conservative, who was very pro-death penalty for 25 years, said in 1994 that he was no longer going to, he said, tinker with the machinery of death because the capital punishment experiment in this country has been such a failure. And since we've brought it back in the 70s, I think we have seen sort of endless adjustments. And I think this bill is one step further in that direction. The drug companies can provide the drugs for executions. They don't want to, as their right as a free enterprise. And so this is just adding a layer of secrecy along with new methods that I think will cause many more issues and sort of many more areas of confusion as we go forward. So just wanted to bring that up, and we have a lot of testimony from the different methods and what they mean, the gassing and the electric chair as well. But just going to the lethal injection, I just think that there are lots of dangers that could result from the removing of all sort of oversight and regulation in terms of the lethal injection that is advanced by this bill. So thank you.
Senator Kleinpeter for a question.
2 questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are you for the death penalty or against it? And second, how did we fail?
I'm against the death penalty.
Okay, so how did we fail? Did we fail, or did the people that committed these heinous crimes fail?
Well, yes, they certainly failed, but I think in the administration of the system, we fail over and over again. We have 84% of death cases in Louisiana are reversed by the Supreme Court or through exoneration.
So the process works. Thank you. No more further questions.
Okay, please, sir, next.
My name is Gary Clemens, and I will speak briefly about both the 3 methods as well as the secrecy provisions. I'll start by saying that the electric chair was discontinued by the vote of this legislature in 1990 under Senate Bill 243. And it's really, I think it's ill-advised to go back and try to repeat history on a third of a century problem. There was, that chair is sitting in the museum at Angola, museum outside the front gates of the prison. You can go and look at it yourself, but it's a method that's really not used anywhere. And so I would guess that out of the 3, it's probably the least likely that's ever going to see actual use. But I just want to point out that reality that the legislature voted in, both houses voted, it was something in the neighborhood of 83-3, and the Senate was similarly like 3 votes against back.
Yeah, they were wrong, but go ahead.
Well, they may have been wrong in their mind, Senator, but the fact is that there was legislation to discontinue the use of that in a federal district court. That hearing was basically found against any constitutional violation, but it was really kind of a moot issue by that point because the legislature had stepped in. I expect that that will return and only become more likely. Secondly, on the part of the thing too is that is what Mr. Sinkfield mentioned about that it appears to be safe. It appears to be not lethal injection, and people said the same thing about the electric chair, is that they didn't hear people crying out, they didn't hear people moving around, didn't see that. And part of that, there's reasons why all those things happen to block the physical ability of the human body to move in both of those types of execution. In lethal injection, there's always been some sort of a muscle relaxant used that basically makes it impossible for a person to move. So it does look like they're going to sleep, but that's not what is going on. In the nitrogen hypoxia, you all probably have heard about the execution that took place in Alabama recently. Interestingly enough, they passed that legislation 6 years ago. It took them 6 years before they had they actually carried out an execution. And it did not go well. And you can read media accounts on that, and I won't belabor it.
So are you against the death penalty,
I'm
period?
against the death penalty, yes.
So it doesn't matter what kind of method it is, you're going to be against it, right?
I don't know. The U.S. Supreme Court has laid out the rules and regulations.
I'm not talking about the Supreme Court. I'm asking you if you're against it under all circumstances. If there was a painless, quick method to execute someone of a crime after due process, you're still against it, I would take it.
I'm against the principle of the death penalty,
Right.
so any type. So
Okay,
there you go.
we're out of time, but Senator Kleinpeter does have a question.
I just wanted to, your main thing was on the electric chair, so I want it for the record. We're just trying to go to all avenues to ensure that executions are taking place, but neither the LASC nor the USSC has declared the electric chair unconstitutional, and in 2020, the Tennessee has used the electric chair to execute Nicholas Sutton. So I just wanted that to be added to the record. So this is not unconstitutional.
Thank you, Senator Kleinpeter. Okay, Mr. Malone.
Sure. Good afternoon, Senators. My name is Brett Malone, and I live in Shreveport. The reason I'm here today is to share my family's journey with you and to challenge you to think and feel about what you're considering doing today and what it means for your legacy as a lawmaker. My mother, Mary Ann Shaver Malone, was murdered on December 18th, 2000, in a small town in northwest Louisiana named Plain Dealing. The young man convicted of her murder, Jeremiah, has lived on death row in Angola since his sentencing in 2002. Over the years, our family has done a hell of a lot of processing and a lot of discussion and a lot of trying to sort through how to get beyond the rage that we felt when this incident happened. We had to seek out help to learn how to cope with the emotions and the grief that we had experienced from that loss. We're now, after 23 years, standing on the same page and on common ground, and have been seeking clemency for Jeremiah. We know that killing him will not bring my mother back, nor will it repair any of the harm that was done by his actions. We are seeking mercy rather than retribution. In fact, recently we asked Governor Landry to intervene and to join us in urging for clemency for Jeremiah. This didn't come as an easy thing for us, and I would hope that you would respect our victim's family as well, and the choices that we are making at this point to speak out on this situation. We want our legacy to be one of mercy and not vengeance, and we do hope to reduce harm to ourselves and to others and not add to it. Having said that, I felt compelled to address this legislative body and ask that you stop seeking more ways, to kill people. Fellow human beings, regardless of what they've done, currently living their lives on death row. When this bill and similar hyper-punitive policies were announced, I was moved to gather my thoughts and make a few requests of this body, as you seem to be steamrolling this heinous bill through, regardless of the massive opposition to it. I find it ironic that we're having these hearings regardless of whether or not y'all are listening. It seems like y'all have woken up since the earlier session, so I'm glad to see that y'all are paying a little more attention now. I find it ironic that we're having these hearings as we near the Easter holiday. As such, I would like to request from you to include possibly an amendment to this bill just to make it more accurately reflect the unholy savagery of killing people, regardless of whether or not it's the state or someone else. First, I wonder what's next. Will you be adding crucifixion as a method of execution? Will you be adding lynching or the guillotine or drawing and quartering or maybe feeding people to the lions? In other words, secondly, I ask that you add to this bill a provision that requires the governor and all legislators who vote for this bill to be chosen randomly to carry out the actual killings when their dates are set. Simply passing these bills into law is not enough. Maybe you should put some of your own skin into the game and really do what you say you believe in and the laws that you choose to pass. So be a man or woman enough and do what it is that you are voting to be done. Be the ones who push the plunger of poison and hold the person down as they violently convulse. The ones who flip the switch that fries the person's brain, and the ones who suffocate the life out of another human being. You see, in your quest to kill evil, perhaps you yourselves are becoming evil. Instead of bringing closure, as y'all love
I'm afraid
to
you're out
claim,
of time, Mr. Malone.
I requested an extra 30 seconds, please, as you've been able to give to others.
I'll give you another 30 seconds.
Thank you. Instead of bringing closure, as you love to claim, for families like mine and others who've lost loved ones to violence, you'll be adding more pain and more suffering, more grief and more harm. And what you do, actually, what are you doing that actually helps us? Because killing people is not going to help us. Never has, never will. So please stop harming us and do the right thing and kill this bill, not more people and in more gruesome ways.
Thank you for your
allowing
testimony.
us to testify.
If I could get 3 more witnesses up. Consuela Gaines, Dr. Samika Minor, Dr. Minor has been not here all day. I don't know. I guess it's a she, or he. Ms. Gaines here. Samika Minor, she here or he? Julie Yoakum. Slaisha Caffrey, is that right? Caffrey, Stacia, Caffey. Tanisha Chenier. Not here. Terry Landry Jr. Mr. Landry, state your name and give us your testimony, please, sir.
Yes. Good morning. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Terry Landry Jr., and I'm the Louisiana Policy Director for the Southern Poverty Law Center Action Fund. I will just be very brief. I've spoken to Representative Mascarella and someone who I admire and have a deep found respect and understand his position in this very hard discussion that we're having here today. My only issue is the methods of which we've elected to go about doing this. I don't know if some of you know, but I think it's in some other states, namely Ohio, some of the veterinarian associations have gotten together and said that the nitrogen gas is cruel and harmful to animals and would not use it to put animals to sleep. But here we are today, and we're willing to do that to human beings. It's not been tested. It takes a significant amount of time. They're not sure if it's painless, and not say that it needs to be painless, but there are certain things I believe that if you wouldn't do to an animal, we definitely shouldn't be doing to human beings. We should value that type of situation more than we value that of a canine or an animal. Also, I've heard Representative Mascarella say on the floor, I believe, that it's our right to carry out the execution of the death penalty under the law. Well, we've had several rights over the course of years. That doesn't make it the right thing to do. It was a right to own people at one point. It was a right to sell these people into slavery. It was a right for Jim Crow. These things were right at the time. That doesn't make it the right thing to do. And so I think that this legislation has some issues. I understand that people want justice. I'm not sure if that's the right way to go about it. I'm not God, and I'm not here to judge anybody who believes that. I've never been put in that situation, so I'm not even defending whether or not the death penalty is the right cause of action. I'm just saying this piece of legislation has some flaws in the way it's executed, the non-disclosure portion. Those are the things that we're opposed to. So that is my opposition to this piece of legislation, and I just ask that you consider those issues. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. You can leave the table. Matilda Carbra. Matilda Carbra. Oh. Okay, Cecilia Capel or Capel, Capital Appeals Project. King Alexander Jr. Ms. Capel, could you state your name and give your testimony, please, ma'am?
Good afternoon. My name is Cecilia Capel. I am the Executive Director of the Capital Appeals Project. I represent men who have been condemned to death. I'm here to speak to the secrecy aspect of this legislation from my personal experience. And I take as a given that the goal of this bill is to make it easier to execute people more quickly. And this bill does not accomplish that. And I'm going to give you a few examples. So, in May 2011, the Department of Corrections purchases vials of pentobarbital, which is the drug that is in their protocol to use to execute people. That pentobarbital was manufactured by a company called Acorn. Acorn is against the use of its products in executions. They put out a statement saying, do not use our drugs to kill people. We want to use our drugs to help people. February 2013, there was an execution that was scheduled that ended up being stayed due to a federal court's order that the Department of Corrections was violating due process by failing to disclose information about how the inmate was going to be executed to the inmate. September 2013, those 6 vials of pentobarbital expired. The DOC at that time contacts a Oklahoma pharmacy called the Apothecary Shop to attempt to buy compounded pentobarbital. The Apothecary Shop says, sure, we'll sell it to you. Just sign this NDA, and we'll do it. But the DOC decided not to buy the drugs from them. And the reason is because they weren't licensed in Louisiana, and they thought that that might be a problem. It wasn't until months later, in December, that there was a story put out in The Lens about this attempted drug transaction. It had nothing to do with stopping the transaction from taking place. That was a decision by DOC not to do it. January 6, 2014, execution warrant was signed again. January 9th, 2014, there was a botched execution in Missouri, and that was Michael Lee Wilson. He cried out that his whole body was burning. January 14th, a few days later, the state of Missouri starts an investigation into what happened to botch that execution. In January 16th, Ohio, we see another horrible botch where it takes something like 25 minutes of choking and gagging, and that was the execution of Dennis McGuire. The execution protocol called for a dose of midazolam and a dose of hydromorphone. A couple of weeks later, the Louisiana Department of Corrections changed their protocol to match the Ohio protocol. It calls now for midazolam and hydromorphone for an execution. And we find this out, we meaning the advocates, a few days before the scheduled execution. January 25th of that year, 2014, the Department of Corrections purchases hydromorphone and midazolam from a Lake Charles hospital. They do this under false pretenses because they say they need it for a patient. As we know, the hospital would not have sold it to them if they knew it was for an execution. And 2, it's the wrong concentration. It's a different concentration of drugs than the protocol calls for. If they had used those drugs in an execution, it would have resulted in a botch or a failure to cause death, which is their goal. When it came to light that the Department of Corrections had purchased the wrong drugs, the Department of Corrections and the state agreed to call off the execution. Again, this is not bullying by the advocates. This is a mistake that was made by DOC that came to light because we received that information. And the story doesn't end there because the Apothecary Shop which is the place where DOC had attempted to buy drugs from and decided not to, had compounded drugs for the botched execution of Michael Lee Wilson. And we know this because despite a secrecy law in Oklahoma and in Missouri, there was an investigation into what happened. Where did the drugs come from? What was going on there? They found that the state of Missouri had bought the drugs from the
Ms.
apothecary
Capel,
shop.
I'm afraid we've gone over your time by about almost a minute. So I would like to turn the mic over to Mr. Alexander.
Senator Morris, can I just say my final thing? I wasn't aware that there was a clock going. I would have modified my remarks to meet your...
Well, I announced 4-minute rule when we started, and I reminded everyone a few moments ago, I guess about 30 minutes ago, so.
I think I could yield 30
I've announced
seconds.
it twice.
I think I could yield 30 seconds of mine.
That's fine, that's fine.
I appreciate that, Senator
Okay,
Morris.
no problem.
This is to say that free information will prevent the botched executions that we've seen in other states, that we do not want to bring shame on our state by nationally, internationally publicized incidents of horrible botches where we see, executions taking 25 minutes of gasping and choking. And the way to ensure that this state is able to accomplish executions in a humane manner is to have transparency in government, because that's the way government works the best. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Alexander.
Thank you. My name's King Alexander. I live in Lake Charles. I am president this year of the Louisiana Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. I live in House 36 and Senate 27. I'm here to read a letter from someone who would have hoped to testify live if this hearing had stayed on tomorrow, but due to court obligations, he could not. So he's a colleague in my home parish. And I'll just read as if I'm him. My name is Dustin Abshire. I write this statement today to give my perspective as a former patrolman and prosecutor. I spent 15 years as a law enforcement officer, with 6 years working as an investigator for sex crimes and severe child abuse. I also worked as a prosecutor on cases where the defendant was sentenced to death. I was proud to represent the state in those cases and to represent the victims. I am not morally opposed to the death penalty. However, after over 25 years of experience in the criminal justice system, I have come to the conclusion that the death penalty does not deter crime, does not help victims, does not make our communities safer. House Bill 6, which expands the methods that we use in this state to execute people, is moving us in the wrong direction. This special session was intended to help deter crime and bring justice for victims. This bill does not accomplish either of those goals. As to deterrence, if the threat of being put to death was an effective way to prevent murder, we would not still be debating the death penalty today. Louisiana has always had the death penalty and has always had one of the highest murder rates in the nation. We executed our citizens with frequency in the 1990s and simultaneously saw the murder rate stay sky high. The death penalty, like many tough on crime policies, has zero impact on the thoughts of those typically accused of the crimes punishable by death. How would expanding the methods that we use to kill them act as a deterrent? As it relates to the rights and safety of victims, my experience has shown me that the death penalty so often hurts victims' families. When prosecutors seek a death sentence, the surviving victims are often told that the sentence will bring them justice, that the execution will bring them closure. They are rarely told that in the state of Louisiana, it is far more likely that the defendant's conviction or sentence will be reversed by a higher court and that the execution will never come to pass. If House Bill 6 passes, the state will be changing the method of execution from the method that these defendants were sentenced under. This will create a host of potential legal challenges and possibly the reversal of death sentences. How is this helping victims? To be clear, I am not opposed to the death penalty personally, but my experience has shown that practically it does not work, and expanding the methods that we use to execute someone to gas or electrocution certainly won't make the system function better. The ends do not justify the means, the cost, the time, the resources. and the emotional strain on the families of victims. The funds spent on expanding the methods of execution and then litigation could be spent on other areas in the system that would truly make victims safer. Our death penalty system has cost taxpayers unknown amount of time, resources, and money spent on trials, numerous hearings and arguments before the Supreme Court and federal court. It is likely for this reason the prosecutors so rarely are seeking death sentences in the state anymore. Louisiana is moving further and further away from the use of the death penalty, but here we are today spending more time and money and resources. I wish I could be there to speak, as writing is not my strongest form of expressing myself. In closing, I leave you with this. The death penalty is only a tool used to show the law-abiding community that we are seeking justice. It rarely results in true peace and justice for those who have lost someone. The amount of time, money, and resources that will be spent expanding the way that we execute individuals could be better spent on something that victims truly need.
Thank you.
Hang on.
Over there. Thank you. Again, I'm just taking maybe a little point of personal privilege. I know you're in where I'm from in Lake Charles. I appreciate you coming. Appreciate the courage you have to testify. Even though I disagree, I still thank you for coming because it still takes guts to come and talk. So thank you. All right.
Thank you, Senator Abraham. If y'all would clear the table and make way for 3 more witnesses. Caroline Tillman, she waves. Claire Fitzpatrick. Sarah Ottinger. And Josh Schwartz. Ms. Fitzpatrick?
Yes.
State your name and please give us your testimony, please, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Claire Fitzpatrick. I'm here speaking for 2 Louisianans who couldn't make it, the nature of the scheduling. The first is Naomi Yavna, a professor at Loyola University teaching Holocaust studies, and Jackie Stern, a New Orleans native where she is raising her 5 daughters with her husband. She serves on the board of many Jewish nonprofits, including the Jewish Federation of Greater New Orleans, the JCC, and the Jewish Children's Regional Service. I gave y'all a copy of the article that was released today. Yeah. With the same content. This week, the Louisiana legislature has taken up House Bill 6, which will allow for the use of nitrogen gas in the execution of death row inmates. As Jewish citizens of Louisiana, we find the use of any form of gas for state executions a violation of our ethical principles and of Judaism's deep commitment to innate human dignity. The Jewish legal tradition, developed over the last 2,000 years, reflects considerable skepticism about the death penalty. While there are biblical passages that appear to support capital punishment, Jewish legal principles demand that we question, analyze, and interpret those texts in determining how they should be applied. The Talmud, a primary source of Jewish law, requires an extremely high threshold that evidence must satisfy for a court to impose a death sentence. In doing so, it recognized the fallibility of human judgment, something with which we are too familiar in Louisiana, where since 1973, 12 citizens condemned to death have been exonerated. We must further acknowledge the tremendous inequity in our legal system, which privileges those with greater financial resources, education, and status, and recognize that this inequity magnifies the possibility of error in capital cases. Even for those who support the role of capital punishment in our criminal justice system, the use of gas as a form of state-sanctioned murder should be deeply troubling. In 1939, the Nazis began experimenting with poison gas, predominantly carbon monoxide, as a means to kill those deemed, in their terms, unworthy of life due to disability or mental illness. After it was decided that conducting mass shootings was too emotionally grueling for German soldiers, the Nazis began to use hermetically sealed vans that filled with gas to kill hundreds of thousands of people, mainly Jewish, Roma, or mentally ill. Finally, the Germans built mass killing centers at Auschwitz and other camps such as Sobibor, Belzec, and Treblinka. in which gas was developed to murder as many as 2,000 men, women, and children at any one time. Approximately 2.7 million people were killed by gas at these killing centers. We recognize, of course, that gassing the innocent victims of the Holocaust is quite different from executing a convicted criminal.
That's very accurate. That's the most accurate thing you said so far.
That's the most accurate thing I've said so far.
Yes. That you are about to equate what we're doing here with Nazis.
Well, I
and that
haven't
is
said that
inappropriate and offensive to me and probably most of the people in the committee. But go ahead with your testimony.
I will. I don't think the events of the Holocaust should be something that we talk about in terms of truth. They happened. And so what
They
I just said
absolutely
is not
happened.
more true or less true than the information before.
And it was innocent people.
All right. At the same time, however, our faith and the faith of many others teaches us that even a murderer is created with innate human dignity, in the image of God. Without condoning their actions, we must recognize death row inmates as fellow humans, however flawed, and remember that we ourselves are called to imitate God in demonstrating compassion. It is hard to see the agony of suffocation through gas as anything other than cruel and unusual in the words of the Constitution, and a breach of the obligation of compassion that we owe to each person in this world. Even the legislators promoting House Bill 6 seem to acknowledge a problem with the machinery of execution, Tellingly, their bills include a secrecy component in which the details regarding the execution, the procurement, and the administration of drugs and their effect on the executed will be legally sealed. Anyone publicizing that information could be charged with a felony. Capital punishment without transparency is dangerous to all of us. House Bill 6 would take Louisiana down a road it should not travel.
Thank you for your testimony. Next is Ms. Ottinger.
Yes, thank you. My name is Sarah Ottinger, and I am an attorney. I'll reiterate what Mr. Clemens said, which is that in 1990 and 1991, the Louisiana legislature got rid of the electric chair. The debate on the floor, there were comments that electrocution had come to be considered a horrible, horrible thing. And the bill was described as not so much for the criminal as it is for society itself. Overwhelming vote in favor of getting rid of electrocution. I was part of a team that investigated and litigated Louisiana's electrocutions beginning in the summer of 1990. The details that came out about those electrocutions were truly horrifying. Photographs. A mother of one of the men who had been executed gave us photographs of her son with large burns to his face and to his leg. And another witness gave us, another sister of an executed man gave us an affidavit. She was a nurse. She talked about first, second, third, and fourth degree burns and what's called sloughing, when the skin was literally falling off her brother. We were told all along, as we've been told today, that there was no problem with execution. There just wasn't a problem. In fact, witnesses who reported smoke were told by prison personnel that it was just steam from a wet sponge. It was burning. I think electrocution as a method of execution should remain a thing of the past. I know that there will be litigation of its horrors because it's horrible, and the evidence is out there. I want to move now to speak for a woman named Velma Mingo. She was set up to come tomorrow to testify, but once rules were suspended, all of the bills appeared today, and she was not able to make it today. So I would like to speak with her. She is the sister of Andrew Lee Jones, who was the last person executed in the electric chair. And she wanted to come here and talk about the pain that her mother experienced over her son getting executed that never went away. Her son was killed. and the pain never went away. That was true of the family as well. And she shared with me that her sister had been killed by a gun. I mean, was shot and killed a year before her brother was killed in the electric chair. And that the grief that came from that was the same. Family members are innocent, and they experience that. She wanted to talk to you about the, she wanted to talk to you about the experience of sitting in a room next to the electric chair with her brother waiting for as long as she was able to stay there, which was until 3 o'clock those days, and talking to him right next to where he would be killed at midnight. She wanted to talk to you about the, and I'm going to finish very, very soon. She wanted to talk to you about the experience of sitting at home at that point at 12:01 when she knew that her brother was dying. The last thing she would have told you was that her brother, Andrew Lee Jones, had a very large burn on his face where the electrode was, the side of his face. And as a result, the family bought him a wig so that he could have an open casket. I spent several hours with her on Saturday, and she and all the family remained grief-stricken.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Senator Kleinpeter for a question.
Thank y'all for your testimony, and I probably shouldn't say this. That gentleman behind you probably couldn't have, his brother probably couldn't have an open casket. You're here for the people that committed murder and be the voice for them. These people behind you had to deal with people who you're trying to defend, and that's not right. There's another place and time that you can come do this, not today.
Thank you, Senator Kleinpeter. Next is Mr. Schwartz.
Yes.
Josh Schwartz.
Thank you, Senator. I'm going to read a letter.
State your name.
My name is
for the
Josh
record.
Schwartz, and I'm going to read a letter from one of the nation's foremost corrections experts, James Aiken, who could not be here today. My name is James Aiken. I have served as the Commissioner of Correction for the state of Indiana, the Deputy Regional Administrator of the South Carolina Department of Corrections, and the Director of Corrections for the U.S. Virgin Islands. I have spent decades as a warden, deputy warden at high-security prisons. I am regularly consulted by corrections professionals for technical expertise on effective prison management and security issues, including in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas. I have provided consulting, technical assistance, and teaching services through the U.S. Department of Justice, Federal Bureau of Prisons, National Institute of Corrections, National Academy of Corrections, and American Directors Association, as well as over 40 jurisdictions. In my over 50 years of experience in corrections, I have managed death row populations, and my duties have included the planning and performance of executions. I have personally performed 2 executions. I write to tell you about the intense toll executions take on prison staff, which I have witnessed and experienced firsthand. It is not an issue that we often openly discuss, but it is real. What I have personally observed in my career validates the following. The prison staff that secures and manages death sentence population, usually over the span of years, are professionals that are dedicated to protecting the public, fellow staff, the prisoners under their watch, and maintaining adherence to the mandates of law. Prison staff generally accept that all human life is valued. The stress and trauma of planning and carrying out the execution of another human who prison staff members have kept safe for decades, whom they have grown to know in a professional manner, cannot be overstated. The prison staff see the condemned inmates every day. get to know them and their families, and know them as people, not just as killers. Executions impact many individuals at the prison: wardens, classification officers, death row officers, death house front gate security, liaisons to the press, mental health professionals, spiritual advisors, officers who sit with the victim's family during executions, officers who sit with the inmate's family, the strap-down team, emergency medical technicians, and the executioner. The corrections officers assigned to death row have the most contact and closest relationships with the condemned inmates, but many others are also involved. The strap-down team, often made of high-ranking officers, escorts the condemned inmate along his final steps and restrain him on the gurney or electric chair. The prison EMTs, trained to save lives, must assist in readying a man for his death and ensuring that he has died. Prison chaplains accompany the condemned man in his last hours, after having grown to know him over years. The warden must oversee the entire process. Even administrative staff must participate in tasks related to an execution. All of these individuals have a job to do and try to do them as best as they can, but the intensive stress of the operation and the personal conflict before and after an execution takes a personal toll on prison staff that we do not often openly discuss. Officers may avoid talking about the subject and become moody or hostile. Officers involved in executions have high incidence of divorce and alcoholism. This is not about political views. Again, I have personally performed 2 executions. Prison staff performing an execution procedure of an inmate do not necessarily equate such duties with being in favor or against the death penalty. It is not sound prison practice to interject a staff member's personal view of capital punishment while also complying with the judicial mandates of law. But it is one thing to support the death penalty in theory and another to be forced to carry it out for someone you have grown to know and been obligated to keep safe. The trauma of planning and participating in an execution follows us through the rigors of everyday life. Asking prison staff to plan and participate in an execution affects them permanently. I know because I have overseen and participated in executions and supervised staff with these responsibilities. The trauma cannot be undone.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Mr. Schwartz, if y'all will clear the table and we'll bring, we got a question by
No, I just
Senator
want to make a
Kleinpeter.
statement. Mr. Schwartz, thank you for your testimony and thank you for what you do. I appreciate it. I do want to go on the record. We all choose to do things in life. I signed up for Marine Corps Infantry and I spent time in Iraq and Afghanistan. There's a Representative Knox on the other side who offered an amendment, and I watched it in committee. He actually relieved our unit in Iraq. And the amendment that he added to this bill requires that DPS&C to make counseling services available for any person involved in the execution of a death sentence within this state. So we are going to take charge on that to make sure that anybody involved in this process will have the opportunity to have counseling. You can respond.
Senator, I appreciate that, and I also thank you for your service. And I would like to just read actually what Commissioner Aiken had said. I didn't think I had time about that amendment. He was made aware of it, and he said, I applaud the efforts of the legislature to ensure the availability of counseling to officers involved in executions. But I want to make clear, number one, executions impact the entire prison staff, from the front gate to the admin staff to the strap-down team. And two, this sort of trauma will not be cured by a few counseling sessions, even if officers choose to take advantage of them.
Okay. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, Senator. Okay, let's get 3 more. Katie Hunter Lowry, Bruce Riley, and looks like Blythe Taplin. Yes. If y'all would come to the table and have a seat and introduce yourselves and give us your testimony.
How y'all
You're
doing?
welcome to start on that end, Ms. Taplin, I guess.
Thank y'all. My name is Blythe Taplin. I am a capital defense attorney, but today I'm here to read a statement of Robert Grass. Mr. Grass represented Kenneth Smith, who is the only person who has been executed in this country through nitrogen suffocation. He witnessed that execution, and his testimony is providing a few details. And I think that as we are introducing new methods of execution and as we are asking others to perform this new methods, a little bit of what Mr. Schwartz talked about, we should talk about what we're talking about, what this really looks like. This is a form of execution, again, that has only happened one time in this country, and it was just last month. Mr. Grass testified before the Kansas legislature this year. Kansas was also considering changing their laws to allow for this method of execution. I do think it should be noted that bill did not pass in Kansas, but Mr. Grass could not be here today, and this is his statement. Thank you for the opportunity to submit this statement to assist the Judiciary Committee's consideration of this bill, which would, among other things, authorize carrying out a sentence of death in this state by hypoxia. I'm an attorney employed by Arnold & Porter. Arnold & Porter represented Kenneth Eugene Smith in post-conviction proceedings after his conviction for capital murder in Alabama became final. I was among the attorneys who provided that legal representation. In that capacity, I witnessed Mr. Smith's execution by forced inhalation of pure nitrogen gas on January 25th, 2024. As far as I know, Mr. Smith is the only person anywhere to be executed by nitrogen hypoxia. As such, Mr. Smith's experience may be useful in determining whether that mode of carrying out a sentence of death will cause death in a swift and humane manner. Based on my observations, I do not think it did in Mr. Smith's case. At a minimum, Mr. Smith did not appear to be unconscious in seconds and dead in minutes, as Alabama predicted. When I was escorted into the witness room with Mr. Smith's other designated witnesses, a closed curtain prevented observation of the execution chamber. Once the curtain was opened, I saw Mr. Smith strapped to a gurney by restraints across his chest, abdomen, and arms. He was wrapped in a white sheet up to his neck, and there was a full face mask covering his face. The warden entered the execution chamber, read the death warrant, and asked Mr. Smith if he wanted to make a statement. After Smith made his statement, the warden left the execution chamber. When the warden left, DOC presumably began to supply nitrogen into the mask covering Mr. Smith's face, and he appeared to be having convulsions or seizures. His eyes rolled up. His legs moved violently up and down several times. His head thrust forward and back on the gurney several times. He clenched his fists, and his arms and body strained against the gurney restraints. I was not permitted to bring a watch into the witness room, so I cannot be precise on the passage of time, but I can say that Mr. Smith writhed for minutes, not seconds. After Mr. Smith stopped writhing, he continued to breathe, although his breathing seemed labored. For at least 5 or more minutes, he appeared to gasp for air. While this was happening, the corrections officer stationed to the left side of Mr. Smith stepped toward him and leaned over his face. After a few seconds, the correction officer returned to his position. The state has an obligation to carry out death sentences consistent with the prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. Even aside from its constitutional obligations, when the state takes a human life, it should do so in a swift and humane manner to preserve the dignity of the condemned and to spare witnesses, including the condemned person's family members and loved ones, from a gruesome spectacle. If, as the Alabama Attorney General said, Mr. Smith's execution was a textbook example of execution by nitrogen hypoxia, that method does not accomplish those goals.
So your issue with the bill is the use of the nitrogen asphyxiation?
That is what my testimony is addressing today, yes.
Right. But you'd be against it regardless, right? Even if it was quick and painless?
Am I against the death penalty? Yes, I am.
Yes, okay. Thank you.
And
your time's up, I'm sorry. Ms. Hunter Reed, you're next. Hunter Lowry, sorry.
Katie Hunter Lowry, Louisiana Survivors for Reform. I want to start by thanking all of the survivors and victims' loved ones for your vulnerability and your bravery. It's really important for the legislature to hear the ways the medical system and the criminal legal system have completely failed victims in this state. And I also understand wanting the person who hurt you to die. The things that I have wished upon the person who raped me are as gruesome as the things in this bill, but that is not up to me. That is a choice that we leave to the divine. And as survivors, we find it very, very troubling that the state is enshrining practices that perpetuate violence and perpetuate murder and are so gruesome that they require amendments to provide counseling. This is barbaric, and what this bill asks people to do is for state employees to violently murder someone. I would not wish witnessing a violent death on anyone. And this legislation asks state employees not just to witness, but to assist with that murder. In 2013, I witnessed from feet away the point-blank murder of a young woman who was walking home in New Orleans. And I was so close that I saw the flash of the gun, and I absolutely thought that I was about to die. And it haunts me, as it will haunt the staff who are being instructed to horrifically kill people. They did not sign up for this, and we as a state cannot perpetuate death by having state employees poison, gas, and electrocute people until they take their last breath. With this bill, Representative Muscarello is creating more pain. And I will close with remarks from the victim's son who witnessed the Smith execution in Alabama. Mr. Sennett said he began to think, how long is this going to take? We were told by some people that worked in the prison system that he'd take 2 or 3 breaths and he'd be out and gone. That ain't what happened. After about 2 or 3 breaths, that's when the struggling started. Other people kept saying he was trying to raise himself up. Yeah, he was. I'd probably try and do the same, try and get off the table. Mr. Sennett says he has been unable to get the violence of Mr. Smith's last moments out of his mind. With all that struggling and jerking and trying to get off that table, it's just something I don't ever want to see again. And I hope that this body is not making decisions based on an arbitrary distinction like real victims. I don't know what that phrase means or why it was used earlier, but there are survivors and victims' loved ones that you have heard today who oppose the violent, horrific murder of a person at the hands of the state, and we ask that you vote no on this bill.
Senator Kleinpeter for a question.
Do either one of you know what he did?
Who are you
The one
referring
that just
to?
got executed in Alabama.
Yes.
What did he do?
Do you know?
Oh, yeah. Don't ask me questions. I ask you questions.
I would appreciate if you would lower your hostility.
Don't ask me questions. That's our job, is to ask you a question.
Senator
So,
Kleinpeter's
do
correct,
you know what he
but
did?
Go ahead and answer the question, please.
He did.
Explain to everyone, what did he do?
Do you want to take this one?
I know that he committed a homicide? Absolutely.
How did he do it? You're here to explain the whole execution, but you don't want to take up for the victims of what he did.
I'm here to speak from my perspective as a victim,
Well, let me explain it
and
to
I'm here
everyone.
speak on behalf
Okay,
of
there's no further questions. Let me,
questions that are not related to my testimony.
there's no, yes, it was, because you brought his name up.
I read the testimony from the victim's son.
It was a murder for hire, and he
regardless-
stabbed the lady 8 times is what he did. So he knew exactly what he was going to do because it was a murder for hire. But everybody's trying to take up for this man that was executed, but nobody's taking up for the victims here. We all just want to live in a kumbaya world and let everybody live forever and not have any repercussions for the actions that they take.
Could I respond?
No further questions.
Could I just respond since you had asked? I will just be brief.
You can respond, but we're gonna keep it limited because I let everybody go over their time. So,
I would just say, it shouldn't have to be said, but lawmakers are not permitted to dole out punishments in the same manner that were inflicted on crime victims. We are a nation of laws, and there's a constitution, and there's a distinction.
we know that.
Well, that was the comparison he just made.
Time out. Nobody here is repealing the Fifth Amendment. Nobody here is repealing the Sixth Amendment. Nobody's repealing the Fourth Amendment. There are all kinds of protections, and due process is afforded all these prisoners, and they have multiple appeals. And the state pays probably your law firm, if I had to guess, for capital defense. So, right?
I assume that
Isn't
was
that
the
correct?
point that was being
So
made.
the state pays your law firm lots of money to defend, does it not?
Sir, it's
I asked you a question. You don't have to answer it. You know, you're not under subpoena, but your law firm is paid lots of money to defend capital cases. Is that correct?
Is my firm paid? Yes.
By the state?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And sir, it was said, quote, "A botched execution is better than what they did to their victims," and I was simply responding to the comparison.
I understand. And nobody here wants to have inhumane executions. The purpose of the bill is to try to find a way to have humane executions and to have them actually go through rather than tied up in appeals after due process has finished. So thank you for your testimony.
Senator Kleinpeter asked me a question and then walked away. I would like to
Look,
close.
we're done.
Morris, I would like to close with saying that as a victim here.
Ma'am, you went way over your time. Okay, is Bruce Riley here? Okay, Leora Green, Samantha, I'm gonna botch this name, Basalajic. That's the best I can do. Tom Costanza. How'd your bill go?
Great. Do you need anything?
No. I'm just, okay. Please state your name since I can't.
My name is Samantha Bassalovich.
I turn the witnesses off. Go ahead.
My name is Samantha Bassalovich, and I'm here today as a member of the National Council of Jewish Women that goes by NCJW, specifically the Greater New Orleans section. NCJW is the oldest Jewish women's civil rights organization working for equity and justice. NCJW strongly opposes this bill. NCJW is one of 20 Jewish organizations that makes up the Jewish Community Relations Council of the Jewish Federation of Greater New Orleans, which passed a resolution last week against the use of gassing in state executions that I have right here today. The resolution states in part that, as a community guided by ethical principles and a deep respect for human dignity, it is imperative for Jews to take a strong stance against the use of gassing in state executions. This position is rooted in our historical experiences, moral teachings, and commitment to justice. The use of lethal gas in executions not only violates fundamental human rights, but also evokes painful memories of the Holocaust, where millions of Jews and others were murdered in gas chambers. We do not suggest comparisons to the atrocities of Nazi Germany, under which millions of our relatives were murdered, many by suffocation in sealed chambers. Still, we cannot imagine it possible that Jewish communities anywhere could stand by while prisoners are executed in our names, using any variation of that mechanism. Therefore, we are resolutely united in our opposition to the expansion of capital punishment methods in Louisiana to include gassing in any form. Lastly, I am also here in my capacity as an alumna and advisory council board member of Avodah, which also strongly opposes this bill. Avodah is a Hebrew word meaning to work or worship. The organization's name stems from its work running a Jewish service corps, a year-long service program for recent college graduates to work in nonprofits and engage in Jewish community. During this year, the corps members often think of their work as worship, as working for a higher purpose. I completed the Service Corps program over 2014 and 2015. During my year of service, I had the chance to grow close to two death row exonerees, Glenn Ford and John Thompson. So I'm also here today to lift them up because they have both since passed, so cannot be here themselves to voice what I know would have been their opposition to this bill. They both spent the limited time they had free speaking about their wrongful convictions to advocate for an end to the death penalty. They too are victims of this system, Senator Morris. I am here today to honor their memories. If you plan to vote for this bill, which I strongly urge you against, I hope at the very least you will amend it to remove the gassing alternative method. Due to the current state of global affairs, when anti-Semitism is on the rise, now is not the time to gas people to death, evoking the method of extermination used by Nazi Germany to mass murder Jews. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Green?
Hello, my name is Leora Green, and I'm also an alumna of the Avodah Jewish Service Corps. I would like to read some excerpts from a piece published in Tikkun magazine in July 1997 by Rabbi Myra Seufer, spiritual advisor to John Brogdon, about her accompaniment of John on the day he was murdered by the state of Louisiana via electrocution in July 1987. I scarcely remember how we passed that afternoon. There were endless cups of coffee and candy bars from the death house's lone vending machine. John and I just talked, though I no longer recall about what. Dinner time, like a bad B movie, the moment of the condemned man's final meal. For his final meal, Brogdon asked for cracklin, cornbread, a cheeseburger, French fries, and a Coke. I mused ironically that John's choice reflected my own unhealthy penchant for greasy burgers and fries. Except for the pork-seasoned cornbread, John's last meal could have been mine. And suddenly my stomach remembered that I hadn't eaten more than a candy bar since early that morning. In an act of perverse kindness, the prison cook had made John's last meal in quantity enough to feed a man for a week. Perhaps sensing my hunger, or perhaps simply unable to consume such abundance, John offered me his unfinished French fries. I froze. I wouldn't move my hand toward those greasy potatoes. They were the food of death. For a moment, I stepped outside my person, ordering myself to take the French fry. I ate it and many more. Finally, the closing stages of the day's ritual began. John was moved to a holding cell. No longer free, with only his hands and ankles shackled, he would spend his last hours again behind bars. And then final procedures began with ritual precision. First, John exchanged his personal clothing for prison-issue garb. Next, they took John from the cell to some more private space. They shaved patches of his body hair so that the electrical connections would be securely made. They changed him into an adult diaper for the release of bodily substances that would pour forth with that first jolt of electricity. 10 minutes before midnight, we began the short walk to the electric chair. Looking on from behind a glass window, Brogdon's spiritual advisor clenched her Bible and cried. I had no idea why I'd brought a Bible. It felt like a stupid, empty prop. I clutched it anyway. I'd sworn I wouldn't cry, not with reporters watching. I cried anyway. Brogdon winced several times and was hit with 4 jolts of electricity beginning at 12:06 a.m. A minute later, the electrocution was completed. Twice a year, I am sure to remember John, on his yahrzeit, the anniversary of his death, and as a new year begins. I mourn John's life, ended in Louisiana's electric chair at the age of 25. 10 years later, now almost 40, little in our justice system seems changed. I remain a committed opponent of capital punishment that I was then. Firmly grounded in a tradition that holds life's sanctity above all else, I know clearly when life's holiness has been upended by state-sanctioned murder. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Costanza.
Good afternoon, Chairman, and thank you, committee members. My name is Tom Costanza, Executive Director of the Louisiana Conference of Catholic Bishops. Certainly, the Catholic Church teaching is solid that life is sacred from conception to natural death. That would be abortion, euthanasia, physician-assisted suicide, and the death penalty. And certainly, in terms of the victims, the church is trying to support the victims. I mean, victims certainly in their own personal conscience, some will say, well, the death penalty is justice for them. And some people, victims will say, no, that I want mercy. It's a real situation, and it's real feeling. So we want to acknowledge that from the start. What I want to talk a little bit about, though, is I've been working with this pharmacy issue. So apparently, this legislation somehow, one principle of Catholic social teaching is subsidiarity. Like, go to the closest, like, go talk to your pharmacist. So apparently, the pharmacy board has oversight, but I'm not quite sure that there'll be oversight from this with this legislation. We have a pharmacy board to provide the best, best oversight of the lethal injection. And so there seems to be some way to not include them. So I was at Xavier with Dr. Norman Francis, 92 years old, and talked to the dean of pharmacy school there. I said, well, Tom, we have a policy board at Xavier and a policy board at the pharmacy school. We meet. And I said, well, wouldn't that be good for the legislature to consult with them? They're training the future pharmacists. Maybe they have some insights that could help us. And I asked a personal pharmacist. Some pharmacists said, well, even if the state doesn't require me to report to the state board, I have to report to the federal feds. So I just want to talk about that in general. In Texas, the pharmacists refuse to give the drug to Texas, so they're using 3-year-old phenobarbital. You talk to a chemist, phenobarbital loses some of its potency, and you might be using 70% of its potency. So all that just to say, could we not make sure that we have the best controls if that's going to happen? And the other thing is nitrogen gas. Air gas is the largest U.S. distributor in the United States. This is what they said. Notwithstanding the philosophical and intellectual debate of the death penalty itself, supplying nitrogen for the purpose of human execution is not consistent with our company values. They refuse to give it to Alabama. I just point out those things in all just sincerity, understanding the victim's tragedy. If this is going to happen, I think what's happening in the community, these pharmacists have ethical codes. They're not going to violate that. Companies are saying this is not good either. So I would just, as you think about this, think about the implications of how, in the medical community and the business community, how they view this. I'm sure you'll probably find a way, but certainly that's something the Catholic Church is opposed to. But if we're going to talk about means, I just wanted to offer that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Costanza, for your testimony. If y'all could, board is clear, so if y'all would make way for 3 more witnesses. Sarah Gozzaco, Emily Heiser, and Catherine Knight. Okay, let's start. You're Ms. Sarah, right? Ms. Gonzalo?
Yeah, my name is Sarah Gonzalo. I'm here in opposition to this bill, but today I will be reading a letter from a pharmacy expert, Dr. William Kirchain. He takes no position on the bill, but raises significant concerns in this letter to y'all. Dr. Kirchain is the director of the Xavier University College of Pharmacy, Health, and Wellness Center. He teaches pharmacy law and regulation at the university. He has served as president of the Louisiana Pharmacists Association, the chair for public policy, Louisiana Society of Health System Pharmacists, vice chair for the Louisiana Board of Medical Examiners Advisory Committee for Collaborative Practice, Louisiana delegate of the American Pharmacy Association House of Delegates, and the Board of Directors of the Louisiana Pharmacists Association. This is his statement to the legislators who wish to listen to it. Thank you for drawing my attention to this proposed House Bill number 6 on execution methods and secrecy, which clearly has implications for the pharmacy profession. To my knowledge, the pharmacy community was not made aware of the bill or consulted prior to its introduction. I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted. The bill exempts pharmacists involved in the provision of execution drugs from Parts 3 through 5 of Chapter 14, Title 37 of the Louisiana Revised Statutes. This essentially removes state oversight of drugs used for executions. Since the mid-1800s, oversight by the Board of Pharmacy has always been viewed as a critical mechanism in ensuring the safety of drug and drug-related products, coupled with ensuring compliance with state and federal laws designed to control the safe manufacture and distribution of drugs. Our state was the first to require a form of examination and issue licenses to practice pharmacy. Removing oversight creates an increased risk of substandard practices and use of unsafe or ineffective drugs. As a state law, the bill will not exempt pharmacists from compliance with federal legislation. Pharmacists have mandatory reporting obligations to the DEA for controlled substances subject to their required registration, and will continue to have our compounding activities regulated by the FDA. The confidentiality provisions appear to expose pharmacists to potential criminal liability for complying with these federal requirements. Failure to comply with federal law can expose pharmacists to criminal and civil liability, fines, loss or suspension of license, and imprisonment. This creates a problematic conflict for pharmacists and pharmacy owners. Federal law governing the compounding of drugs is particularly complex. If the Louisiana Department of Corrections would need to create the facilities or capacity to compound drugs, it would require significant funds to do so in accordance with United States pharmacopoeia provisions, federal regulations, and third-party accreditor standards. Any such facility would also be subject to costly reporting obligations and liable for violations of these same federal laws and third-party accreditation standards.
Thank you for your testimony. Lady in the middle, I don't know if you're Emily or Catherine.
My name is Emily Heiser, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, and fellow members of the committee. I am a native New Orleanian. I am here to oppose HB 6, and since it does matter to some of you on the committee, I will state that I do not believe the government should be in the business of killing its citizens. But I'm actually here to talk today about the pharmaceutical companies who oppose using their drugs for executions. Over the last 9 years, more than 60 global pharmaceutical companies have taken action to prevent the use of their medications in executions. Today, every pharmaceutical manufacturer of FDA-approved medicines sought by executing states opposes the use of their medicines in executions and has taken steps to prevent it. Manufacturers, distributors, and other healthcare companies have taken robust action on this issue, releasing public statements, implementing restricted distribution, and pursuing other engagement to help prevent the misuse of medicines in executions. What I'm about to read is a non-exhaustive list of drug companies who have said that they will not participate in executions. Merck Pharmaceuticals, GlaxoSmithKline, Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, Abbott Laboratories, AbbVie Incorporated, Acorn Incorporated, which you'll remember Ms. Capel noted in her testimony, Alvogen Incorporated, American Regent Incorporated, Amerisource Burton Corp., Association for Accessible Medicines, Athenix Inc., Athenix Pharma Solutions, Aeromedics Pharma LLC, Baxter International, B. Braun Melsugen AG, Cardinal Health, Community Pharmacy Services, Custopharm Inc., Dash Pharmaceuticals, Dr. Reddy's Laboratories Limited, Dynalabs LLC, Fresenius Kabi LLC, Fresenius Kabi Compounding LLC, Grandpati Exim, Gland Pharma Limited, Henry Sheen Inc., Hikma Pharmaceuticals, Jiangsu Hungary Medicine Company, Jonah Cayenne Pharmacy Formulation, Lilly Healthcare, Lundbeck AS, McKesson Corporation, Methiel Pharmaceuticals, Mylan NV, Non AG, Par Pharmaceuticals, Paramel Pharma, Renaissance Lakewood LLC, Roche Holding AG, Sejan Pharmaceuticals, Sandoz AG, Shrenick Pharma Limited, Somerset Pharma LLC, Sun Pharmaceuticals, Tamarang Pharmaceuticals, Tera Pharmaceuticals Industries, XGen Pharmaceutical. And again, this is a non-exhaustive list of pharmaceutical companies. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Knight?
Thank you. My name is Catherine Knight. I'm here to oppose this bill. I'm going to speak to you today about the method of nitrogen suffocation as a form of execution. Personally, I do not believe the state should be killing its citizens, but if it insists on doing so, it should, in all its ultimate power, do so in a transparent and humane manner. There is nothing more scary than the state killing people clouded in secrecy and in ways that are tantamount to torture and inhumanity. Senator Morris, yourself, just a few minutes ago, said that nobody here wants to have inhumane executions. As part of my preparation for today, I read up on the events of Kenneth Smith's execution and spoke with a medico-legal expert at length who is qualified as an anesthesiologist and intensive care specialist. What follows in my testimony is pulled from our discussion. The process of executing someone via nitrogen hypoxia is essentially suffocating someone to death. This process would be akin to putting a plastic bag over someone's head. The human body is hardwired to know that if you aren't breathing, it should do whatever it can to try to rectify that. This is a very distressing state to be in, and the distress comes on faster than the loss of consciousness. However, even when consciousness is lost, some awareness is still maintained. From the witnesses at the execution of Kenneth Smith, we know he appeared to lose consciousness within around 7 minutes of the nitrogen gas inhalation beginning. 7 minutes, that's almost double the time you are giving me to testify today. During that period of consciousness, Mr. Smith would have known he was suffocating. This would have been the first stage of the experience. Once he had lost consciousness, he would have continued to have some sort of awareness or experience, even if his brain was no longer engaging in analytical thought processes. This is because the parts of the brain that control feeling and experience require less oxygen than the parts that control analytical thought, and as such, the thinking part of the brain will be starved and cut off more quickly than the awareness and feeling part. Until the brainstem is destroyed, which is one of the last parts of the brain to die following a period of hypoxia, and when death is pronounced, there remains a potential for feeling and experiencing. This means that it is entirely possible that Mr. Smith suffered for a full 28 minutes before he was pronounced dead. In addition to the effects of hypoxia on the brain, blood supply will start to be cut off to other organs, causing, for example, extreme chest pain and abdominal pain in light of the organs affected in those areas. We also know that lung aspiration was found on Mr. Smith's autopsy report. Fluid aspiration would likely have occurred as a result of him dry heaving and then vomiting the contents of his stomach and gastric juices. This would have been inhaled into his lungs prior to his death, causing inflammation and a further experience of pain. There is no state in the US that provides medical aid assistance in dying that allows nitrogen hypoxia as a form of assisted suicide. This is because the scientific literature unanimously agrees that it is an inhumane and experimental form of death. My conversation with this doctor ended in him saying, if you're looking for an instantaneous way of killing someone, this is not it. The fastest way would be via the guillotine, and if I was to be executed, this would be the process that I would take any day over nitrogen suffocation. It is an awful and inhumane way to die.
Thank you for your testimony. Senator Barrow for a question.
Just one quick question to Ms. Emily Heiser. If you can make that list available, I would like to have a copy of that list of
Yes,
all the
ma'am, I'd be
pharmacy
happy
companies.
to.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Barrow. We have three more, actually four more, but we'll take three at a time. Ms. Kira Weed. Ms. Weed. Erica Navalance, and Ms. Cora Pate. As you all come to the table, I think we might ought to take up some amendments. Senator Barrow has amendment. Can we pass that out? Excuse me, ladies, we all just wait on us just a moment. I was going to go ahead and pass it out, discuss it, or you want to wait till? Okay. Okay, Senator Barrow wants to wait until we're done with the opposition to the bill, so I thought we'd try to do things a little quicker. Okay, ma'am, can you start?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Dr. Kira Weed. I have a master's degree in public health and a PhD in pharmacology. I'm here to express some concern with House Bill 6. When I was reviewing it a couple days ago, some people asked me to review it as a pharmacologist, and I noticed some things with it, specifically sections E and F that are going to be added to statute 15569. The addition of section E1 would exempt all purchases of goods for the purpose of carrying out an execution for the entire Louisiana Procurement Code. This includes the ability to request formal contracts, the right to audit records, the right to inspect the place of business, and the right for the state to debar or suspend contracts for poor performance. In addition, Section F shields those making or providing drugs for execution from any regulation or oversight by the Louisiana Pharmacy Board by exempting them from the portions of the statute that deal with licensing, permits, or discipline. They are also exempted from the Digital Prescription Monitoring Program, which was established in, I believe, 2006. Essentially, the state would have no oversight over the agencies producing or providing drugs. Thus, these drugs could be created even by non-pharmacists at home, and no one, not even the state, would have any way of knowing or investigating any problems that arise. DOC could purchase the drugs in good faith, but without any monitoring, those drugs could be contaminated, ineffective, have dangerous side effects, or simply be the wrong drugs. Even if a pharmacy or compounding facility is working in good faith with the state of Louisiana, labs could be using untried or untested drug alternatives, less than optimal practices, or simply make a mistake if this bill was to be accepted as written. using these products to perform an execution could result in a prolonged death, agonizing pain, or cause damage to the person's body. Or the drugs could fail to kill the person, resulting in a failed execution altogether. The bill also creates a potential legal black market. By opening the door for any drugs manufactured with the intent to sell them to the Department of Public Safety and Corrections in the administration of an execution, these become invisible to the Louisiana Prescription Monitoring Program. If DOC does not purchase them when offered, the manufacturer could legally divert them to what would normally be considered illicit sales. However, the state of Louisiana would be unable to intervene without breaking the law as written within HB 6, nor involve federal agencies without revealing the identities of those involved. Anonymity of everyone involved is a large component of this bill. The reason for this is simple. All monitoring and risk of repercussions for less than stellar performance are removed. Corners can and very likely will be cut in order to produce the cheapest product. For compounds used in lethal injection, this can result in a product that is less potent than used when sold. It could also be less pure, contain contaminants that would result in all kinds of unforeseen problems during an execution. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Pate?
Patz.
Pat. P-A-T-Z?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Patz.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Cora Patz. I'm an active member of the Jewish community in New Orleans, and I am a current participant of the Avodah Jewish Service Corps. The Union for Reform Judaism's Religious Action Center has spoken out against capital punishment consistently since 1959, and I share this view for a few reasons. This bill seeks to use gassing as a method of execution, the same method that the Nazis used to exterminate the Jewish people. The Nazi regime sought to dehumanize their victims, and they used methods consistent with this. It's hard to feel safe in a country that would elect to use these same barbaric methods. The preservation of life is our highest value in Judaism, so much so that we have a Jewish law, Pekua Nefesh, saving a life, that holds that the preservation of human life overrides virtually any other religious rule of Judaism. With regards to the death penalty, the Torah stresses the importance of presenting completely accurate testimony in capital cases. For any mistakes or falsehoods could result in the shedding of innocent blood. People have been exonerated that have been killed on death row. Now, when someone dies in Jewish practice, we say, Baruch Dayan HaEmet. Blessed is the true judge, a reference to God. Yet when we decide when someone lives or dies, regardless of their crimes, we are taking the power out of God's hands. We are ending a life before they have the ability to atone or show signs of remorse. This bill not only risks taking an innocent life, which is a very big risk in my opinion, but if enacted, would evoke every Jewish person's worst nightmare. A state that chooses to gas its citizens. And I do not mean any disrespect by making this comparison, but I ask you, why risk having people make the comparison to Nazi Germany? Thank you for your time.
Doesn't the Jewish state, didn't they track down the criminals, war criminals, for 50 years and then have them executed?
So
only the witness can respond.
When I hear people describing the method of killing people by the use of gas, as a Jew, all I think of is the Holocaust.
millions and millions of people tortured to a state of complete unrecognizability where they were so dehumanized they then walked into a gas chamber. That's what I visualize, and that's all I'm here to say.
I understand that, and I understand why Jewish people would be triggered a bit by that method, and and maybe that'll stay in the bill, maybe it won't. I don't know, but you said that you had an issue with the state, and with a state that would do that, and the state of Israel did that, rightfully so in my opinion, and tracked down Nazi war criminals for 50 years and brought them to justice, tried them, and executed them whenever they could. I've got to go on to the next witness.
Could I just say that I wouldn't use Israel as a comparison of how to treat human beings right now? That's all. Thank you, sir.
Sure. Please maintain decorum or I'll ask you to leave. Okay, ma'am, you're next.
Thank you. My name is Erica Navalance, but I'm actually here today. It's obvious that we disagree on the fundamental nature of the death penalty, but really this is a bill about methods. And Senator Morris, I take in good faith the comment that you made that no one, if we're going to have the death penalty, we don't want it to include torture. And so I think the testimony, I'd like to read from a doctor who is more, is a better person to speak to that. So this is a letter from Dr. Joel B. Zivit, and he says, I am a Georgia licensed physician with specialties in anesthesiology and intensive care medicine and currently practice at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. Because of my training and practice, my opinion has been sought many times on the technique of execution widely known as lethal injection. I've also provided extensive testimony and commentary on the new method of execution known as nitrogen hypoxia. I was a consulting expert and testifying witness in the case of prisoner Kenny Smith, who Alabama executed with nitrogen gas. After reviewing House Bill number 6, I wish to raise my concerns about the proposals and dispel any notion that the methods included come close to implementing quick or relatively painless death. To the contrary, Louisiana would likely find itself a party to the unlawful act of cruel torture. It further puts the Louisiana public at grave risk by neutering the Louisiana State Board of Medical Examiners, as well as undermining critical oversight by the Pharmacy Board. The bill lists 3 methods of execution. The first method is described as intravenous injection of a substance or substances in a lethal quantity into the body. This language leaves wide open what substance would be used, including something unregulated, untested, or frank poison. The vagueness of this language is likely intended to address the problems of obtaining known pharmaceutical supplies, but instead, last-minute substitutions raise a real risk of a torturous death. Lethal injection in every known attempted form is very likely flawed on its face. Unlike the claim that lethal injection is akin to falling off to sleep and then dying, autopsy evaluations show that prior to death in almost 80% of executions, the prisoner's lungs fill with frothy blood. Based on my review of almost 250 autopsies of executed prisoners, death through this method is more like drowning in your own blood than dying while sleeping. The second method is simply described as nitrogen hypoxia. Based on my medical knowledge of the human body and my understanding of the chemistry of nitrogen gas, I predicted in my reports and testimony that death in this way would be slow and torturous. I predicted that Mr. Smith would suffer a seizure, which he did. I was concerned that he might vomit and choke on or aspirate gastric fluids. During the execution, observers reported witnessing Mr. Smith dry heaving, a common sign of vomiting. I was concerned, Through his clear mask, the signs of terror on Mr. Smith's face were easy to see. He bucked and strained as he slowly suffocated. In addition to the experience of suffocation, hypoxia results in damage to other regions of the body, which can be incredibly painful. And I know we have a limited amount of time, so if I could just skip ahead, I'm sorry. The state of Alabama predicted, based on nothing, that the prisoner would be unconscious in seconds and dead in minutes. Multiple witness accounts confirmed my predictions. The entire time to die may have been as long as 30 minutes. His death was so torturous that experienced death penalty witnesses remarked that they had never seen such a terrible thing. It's important to note that even when a person appears unconscious and their higher brain functioning is impacted through damage caused by hypoxia, other portions of the brain may still be functioning for a longer time. And during this period, they can continue to experience pain because hypoxia damage may take additional time to penetrate all relevant portions of the brain. And if I could just and I understand we're close on time, so I won't, Dr. Zivit has more to say, but if I could quickly. The third method is electrocution, causing to pass through the body of the person convicted, a current of electricity of sufficient intensity to cause death, and the application and continuance of such current throughout the body of the person convicted until such person is dead. The amount of voltage needed to cause death may be in the range of 100 to 250 volts when using alternating current. This bill doesn't specify exactly how electrocution would be utilized, what safeguards would be in place to avoid the possibility of intense heat causing the eyeballs to melt, the body to catch fire, arcing, electrical current, or simply a failure to cause death. This method is seldom used and was last used in Louisiana in 1991. The terms of House Bill 6, if adopted, would be the shame of any state. My own autopsy research shows that lethal injection in any form is flawed in its face. Death by nitrogen hypoxia will all be cruel and torturous. The myriad potential complications of death by electrocution makes it unfit and unlawful. Secrecy will prevent progress and drive a wedge of distrust between the electorate and the legislature. And blocking the medical board from physician regulation is the worst affront to medical professionalism, puts the public at unacceptable risk, and may be a place for bad physician actors to be shrouded and protected. Reject House Bill 6 and help Louisiana step back from the unlawful, dangerous, and cruel torture the bill intends.
Thank you for your testimony. Y'all, the board is clear. Y'all may clear the table. We do have one more witness wishing to speak. Annette Viator.
My name is Annette Viator, and I'm the former general counsel for corrections for 20, I did life, okay? And I'm here because I was around and was in charge of implementing lethal injection in 1990, 1991, when the legislature and the governor instructed us to become aware and informed of the process that we needed to do. I am not here in an adversarial position. As Bruce Lynn, the Secretary of Corrections, used to say, I'm not buying and I'm not selling. I testified extensively on this subject many years ago, and I'd like to say that one of the things we were very conscious of, and I'm sure you are, and I see that the Senator's taking great care, which pleases me, was that we wanted to make sure it was always open and above board, that there was no secrecy, because we saw what other states had gone through. We did extensive research. We also did extensive touring of several states with alternative methods. It was important to us to know how each state carried out alternative methods of execution other than the electric chair. In this case, we went to 8 states, I was on the committee, to find out how they implemented, at the time, lethal injection. I think the number one thing I want to say to y'all is that we felt like we were Switzerland. We did not want to take a stand, and I believe that corrections should not, and they won't. They want to make sure they do it right. That is the number one process corrections is going to be concerned about. I'm not there anymore. I'm retired. However, I want to make sure that we all know that there are many methods. Each one of them had problems. There's no such thing as no problems. It's just not possible. There's some that are crueler than others. There's some that have more problems than others. I also urge you to do a cost analysis research on this because there's money involved in each one of them, more in some, however. As you know, the electric chair is in a museum right now. I don't think you want to reinstate it. I think you'd want to start over. As far as the gas chamber, we ruled that out after touring states that were considering it. By the way, we did this in secrecy because no state wanted to talk about it publicly. We went to Texas and were put into a locked room with the warden of the walls. That's how secretive it was. Basically, I'm here to ask you to look into research and analysis of each one of the methods before you go forward, since it's very important for each one of you, as well as DOC, to have everything they need to go forward. There's no rush. I know that the victims want justice. I'm with them on that. I am not adverse to any of that. I am just here to urge caution. I think that you do this in a way that makes sure that if you're going to make any of these processes available, that you make sure that there is extensive research, analysis, and experts weighing in on it. We did that. We took almost a year. We toured extensively, and it really did pay off because we've never had a death challenge on lethal injection for it being done improperly. It paid off. That's what I'm here to say, is that I'm hoping that we do that. We don't want to make a travesty of anything. I want to preserve Louisiana's good name. That was our #1 priority in 1990, is to preserve the good name. And as the general counsel, I made sure that we did everything we had to. We crossed our T's, we dotted our I's, we made sure. And by the way, there were all of these methods available then. The Secretary of Corrections at the time, Mr. Bruce Lynn, who was a former legislator, urged us to pick a lane so that we wouldn't be scattered, that we would find one and decide that that's what we were going with. And we picked lethal injection. I understand the drugs are no longer so readily available. I would urge this committee to seek one of the methods and put your research, expertise, and money, which is going to be large, into that one method, and make sure it's humane, and make sure there's not going to be the huge litigation that can follow if you pick the wrong one. We didn't have to litigate it. We did everything ahead of time, and we never had to litigate it. And it cost a little bit to tour, it cost a little bit to do the research, but it paid off in years afterwards with the correct method. I have nothing further to say. If you have any questions about our methods or how we did it or what we did, I'd be happy to answer them, but that's my purpose in being here. It's informative, not adversarial.
Thank you very much. Your testimony was very, very well reasoned, and you speak from a lot of experience, so thank you for coming back to the Capitol. That's all I have for opponents of the bill who want to speak. I do have a lot of cards to read in that are opposed as well. This is Ashwini Velshami, present provide information is requested against the bill. Robert Jones is against the bill. Gail Shuterom is against the bill, does not wish to speak. Natalie Sharp will provide information if requested against the bill. Chico Yancey is against the bill. He spoke earlier, I think maybe on a different bill. Julia Luzides will provide information if requested against the bill. Christina Wollenberg against the bill. Sally Alvarez against the bill. Angela Hode against the bill, not wishing to speak. Angel Bradford, present, not speaking, against the bill. Nanette Oliver against the bill. Morgan Evans against the bill. Ellen Finley against the bill. Talia McMath, no check mark, but against the bill. Robert Morris against the bill. Mr. Yancey, second card against the bill. Lakita Smith against the bill. Megan Garvey, or Gary, I think it is, against the bill. And she put two. There are two cards there. Peter Robbins Brown, present against the bill. Sarah Whittington, I think she actually spoke. Provide information if requested. Rebecca Collins against the bill. We do have a couple of amendments. First of all, Senator Barrow, y'all want to pass out Senator Barrow's suggested amendment, and I'll let her explain.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And before I explain my amendments as you guys are receiving them, I do want to make some comments. I have sat here and listened to both sides of the testimony, the proponents and the opponents, and this is certainly a high-spirited, high-emotional subject matter, as it should be, because we're talking about life and death. I am pro-life from the womb to the tomb. That is what I believe in. As many of my colleagues have professed as well. There's been a lot that's been said today, and before I go any further, the young lady that came up, Claire Fitzpatrick, I just want to encourage you to continue to speak your voice and be an advocate. We definitely want to encourage young people to do that. But there was a comment made early on by one of the proponents of the bill, and she stated something about race being an issue, how race comes up all the time. And it does, because unfortunately, people of color are mostly impacted more widely. And I guarantee you, if this bill passed, while we represent only a third of the population here, you would have more people of color who are actually prosecuted or killed. I believe that the facts would bear that out as well as the data. There were some other comments that were made as well that I think needs to be stated or brought up. I remember very vividly, because I've been on this committee, as I stated earlier, 9 years. Senator Malone was on this committee, and many of you may remember her story, where her stepdaughter was killed. And I remember when this topic came up and how she spoke out against it, and while she recognized the anger and the anguish of being a victim, because she and her husband went through it, was her husband's daughter, she also recognized the importance of life. And so I am not minimizing anybody's emotions. I hope that does not come across at all. Because I stated earlier to someone in reading the book, The Shack, that book is very emotional. And honestly, I am still betwixt about it because of what comes out of it. But the main thing that comes out of that book is forgiveness. And as I was doing my research and trying to come up with my amendment, one of the things that I came across was this statistic. In 2022, it was found that in Louisiana, specifically in Orleans Parish, that the highest percentage in the U.S. of exonerations of wrongfully convicted people were in New Orleans, with Jefferson Parish ranking fourth. And one thing about it, and somebody brought this up, once somebody is executed, if they were found not to be guilty, you can't bring them back. I believe that we cannot place ourselves in the position of being God. I don't think that's our job. I think that people pay for being convicted for life is a conviction. Not being able to ever be out, that is not being free. I think that we have to be very, very careful in these methods that are being proposed. I thought that we can keep one of them in. As I listened to the testimony, I've taken them all out. I believe these methods are barbaric. And so what this amendment, my first amendment, which is set 235, I'm assuming everybody has it.
Yes, I think it's been passed out.
Okay, so amendments 1 and 2 are technical because it changes in terms of the number. Amendment number 3 actually takes out all of the forms of execution or how an individual could die. And I think that the general counsel kind of spoke to that. It says that the state can determine after officially studying what that method needs to be. 8 through 14 actually strikes out that language. And then the next amendment actually will allow the family to know, as well as the public to know, in which form was used for the execution. And then my last amendment, number 6, actually speaks to how much, because it does not say in the counseling what that counseling would look like. So I was like, is that into perpetuity? How long will the counseling last? And so this puts a dollar amount of $1,500 for counseling.
Okay, thank you, Senator Barrow. Now, the line 6, the amendment number 3, you say that the execution is going to be done after a study, but in a manner other than nitrogen hypoxia electrocution or lethal injection. What else is left? Firing squad?
No, that is not that for them to study and to find out. I mean,
are you aware of any other methods of execution that would be humane?
No, that's even more barbaric. No, I think that the group can study and come back with some suggestions.
But you're not aware of any?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Senator Barrow offers up amendment set 235. Is there any objection? Senator Miguez objects and wants to tell us why.
That's all right.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just looking and listening to the author of the amendment, and it seems to do a pretty good job of gutting the bill, so I'm going to object on that point. Thanks so much.
Okay, so we have an amendment to which, by Senator Barrow, to which Senator Miguez has objected. All in favor of the amendment, please vote yea. If you want to reject the amendment, please vote no. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Abraham?
No.
No. Senator Barrow? Yes. Senator Cloud? No. No. Senator Hodges? No. Senator Kleinpeter?
No.
No. Senator Miguez? No.
5 nays, 1 yea, so the amendment fails. I've got an amendment that I've worked on with a number of people. If the staff could hand that out. Oh, you have another one too? Okay. I've only seen one. We'll take up mine and then we'll pass out your second amendment. Okay, members, amendments 1 through 3 operate to take out the criminal penalty in the bill. There have been some concern raised by a number of people, including but not limited to the press, ladies, talking about y'all. So to assure that this statute will be upheld, we agreed that we would take the criminal penalty out. The civil penalty is still in there. It also has a severability provision on Amendment 4 that basically says if any part of the law is declared unconstitutional or not valid for any reason, that the rest of the law will be still valid. And then the last section, it makes the effective date July 1st, which is a little later than the bill originally had to give time for implementation. I see no questions on the amendment. So I'll offer the amendment up. Is there any objection to the adoption of the amendment? Senator Barrow objects. So, you know, it makes the bill, you know, okay.
Chairman,
Fair enough.
if I may,
Yes.
the effective date, this is prospective though, correct? I mean, this is.
Correct.
Okay, I want the record to be clear that it's the intent of the body that it be prospective.
Of course.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Nothing in the amendment changes that. Okay, I've offered the amendment. Senator Barrow has objected. If you want to adopt the amendment, vote yes. If you're against the amendment, vote no. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Abraham?
Yes.
Yes. Senator Barrow? No. No. Senator Cloud? Yes. Yes. Senator Hodges? Yes. Senator Kleinpeter?
Yes.
Yes. Senator Miguez? Senator Morris?
You call my name? Yes.
6-1.
All right. So that amendment's adopted. We have one more amendment by Senator Barrow that is being handed out. Okay. Senator Barrow, you want to explain what your amendment does?
Yes, I'm trying to follow real quickly. I know what the intent is. So the intent is to do away with the secrecy of the medicine or the pharmaceuticals that's going to be used for the execution. So look, it's deleting on page 4, 5 through 16. And then, like, number 3 is a technical amendment because it's actually just changing the terms of the numeration. And it's like amendment number 1 does the same. So this really just deals with the pharmaceutical companies not being disclosed. That's what this amendment does. That information, to me, I think it's extremely important that we know who actually is providing the medication and what's being utilized.
Okay, Senator Miguez
263.
has a question on the amendment. Senator Miguez.
Well, I'm just objecting to it. The last amendment she had gutted it. This amendment cuts the bill in half, so I'm going to go ahead and object.
Okay. Okay, Senator Barrow has offered up amendment set number 263, to which Senator Miguez has objected. A yes vote adopts the amendment, a no vote rejects the amendment. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Abraham?
No.
No. Senator Barrow?
Yes.
Yes. Senator Cloud?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Senator Cloud, no. Senator Hodges? No. Senator Kleinpeter?
No.
No. Senator Miguez? No. 5 nays, 1 yea.
5 nays, 1 yea. The amendment is rejected. I believe we're done with amendments. Oh, you want your mic off?
No, I thought she had saw the light.
Oh. No such luck, Senator Barrow.
Chairman, if I just
It's been
want
a
to.
long day. She might be seeing some sort of light, but I don't know if it's the one you want.
I wanted to clarify.
Are you seeking a question? No. Okay. Okay, Representative Muscarelli, you could close on your bill.
Just to clarify that your amendment was retroactive, I meant to say, not prospective, retroactive, because that could be a problem. Yeah. So it's not applying forward, it's applying, it goes back.
The amendment.
Would apply to the current people on death row.
Oh, yes.
That's my intent.
Yes, it doesn't change that. It just eliminates the penalty.
I just didn't want somebody to get this testimony and say that
it does 3 things. It eliminates the penalty provision, those 3 lines where it says for anybody who discloses that information can go to jail for 2 years.
Okay.
It eliminates that out of the bill. It doesn't touch the civil action that you could bring, that could be brought. And it adds a severability provision that says if any part of it is declared invalid, then the rest of it will be valid. And then it just changes the effective date from, upon the governor's signature, or was it? It wasn't designated originally. So that would have been, 10 days after he signed the bill or something, or 10 days after the session's over, whatever the law is, but which would have been before the next session starts. So we wanted, in case there are any tweaks, we wanted to make sure that it didn't go into effect until the regular session is over. So we made the effective date July 1st, 2024, which is what we're doing with a lot of the bills, just to, make sure there's time to properly implement them.
Thank you. Members, 8 states have this form of what we call a drug shield statute. Texas last year executed 8 people. This process can be performed. It's in the books. This is not a novel concept. I use other state laws to form our law. Let's give these victims their day of justice. The debate was healthy, but at the end of the day, we need to do our jobs. And I'll turn it over to Senator Kleinpeter.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members. It's been a lengthy debate, I think right at 3 hours now. I have the privilege to serve on this committee with you all where we have the opportunity to listen to the testimonies of the families behind us, and I commend them for coming here with the courage. Like Mrs. Burton, who was carjacked and shot along with her son, who was not even a year old and passed away. Like the Vincent's family, who lost their family member, who served this country in the Army and this state as a trooper and died in the line of duty. Or like the Gardos, whose beautiful daughter Stephanie was murdered in 1995 while begging for her life. Let me say that again. The year was 1995. And the convicted killer has exhausted all appeals, yet he still sits on death row alive. I was 14 when that happened, and I'm 42 now. These are just a few stories when the appeal delays are ruled on, and when the time to honor the commitment has come, nothing happens. You all heard the merits of this bill from Representative Muscarella, but I want to remind you all that we are not here to create a law for the death penalty. It is already a law of the land. We are here to simply expand the methods of execution, as well as to protect those involved with the lethal injection process. We made an oath to uphold the laws of our state. Today we can honor that oath and remove the hurdles so that justice may be served for the victims. Mr. Chairman and members, I ask that you support me, Representative Muscarella, and the families of the victims behind us. I ask for favorable passage of House Bill 6.
Okay, Senator Kleinpeter has moved to report Senate Bill number 6 with amendments. Is there any objection? Yes. Senator Barrow has objected, so the vote will be, if you want to report the bill with amendments, which makes it go to the floor, vote yes. If you're against the bill, you want to stay in committee, vote no. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Abraham?
Yes.
Yes. Senator Barrow? No. Senator Cloud? Yes. Senator Hodges? Yes. Senator Kleinpeter?
Yes.
Yes. Senator Miguez? Yes.
The yeas have it, so the bill will be reported with amendments. Thank you, Senator Muscarella. Thank you to all of you who came, both sides. I apologize if I got a little testy with some witnesses, but the emotions did run high. Anyway, but thanks to all.